going on, fellow simmers and flight enthusiasts? I'm Shade, #sign Navy 9 from JTF Hangar 1. Well, if you're watching this video, that means either you've just purchased this aircraft or you're trying to gain a greater knowledge in its operational systems. As always, I'm not going to waste your time with you watching me fly around unless it's really necessary in order to demonstrate a particular system of the aircraft. It's my goal that upon successful completion of this video, you should have enough operational knowledge of the aircraft systems to get you airborne and flying one of the most enjoyable military aircraft in my hangar. Now, I've broken this video down in sections so that you can go back at any time and review a particular segment in case you missed something the first time around. X-Plane is my flight sim platform, and I'll be using a few plugins designed for X-Plane during the making of this video, and I'll list them all below in the comments. As for aircraft, during this video, I'll be flying the F-35 Lightning and configuring it for close air support. Well, if you're ready, let's go ahead and head out to the tarmac and get this flight started. Well, here you see the F-35 STOVL created by AOA Simulations for X-Plane in the close air support configuration. It's designed to reach estimated speeds between Mach 1.5 and 1.8. It has a maximum altitude of about 45,000 feet and a maximum takeoff weight of 60,000 pounds. Now, depending on the weight configuration, it also has an estimated range of 1,600 nautical miles. This aircraft has many animations on it. As you can see on the starboard side of the aircraft, the fuel probe has deployed and also the cockpit opens, and what you're looking at now is the actual engine where it can be vectored down to 90 or 100 degrees to assist in STOVL takeoff. STOVL is short takeoff and vertical landing. Well, let's go ahead and get everything closed up and buttoned up and head inside to the mission briefing room and look at our flight plan for this flight. Utilizing a freeware software called Little Nav Map, I've already put together our flight plan for today. I'll be taking off from KSAN, San Diego International, flying due north. I'll be engaging a few enemy aircraft along the way. At that point, I'll proceed to Camp Pendleton, drop a little ordnance on their ordnance range, and then from there, I'll be proceeding on to KNUC. When you start up the simulation and you enter the F-35, this is the first sight that you see. The cockpit is in what's called a cold and dark configuration. Let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like when power is applied to the digital control system. Once you've completed your startup procedures, this is what the digital control system looks like. In the upper left quadrant, that's your warning system. It also indicates the status of your brakes. And below the status of your brakes is your condition of your landing gear. It also monitors your engine performance. And to the left of that is a smaller table. Now, this table is very important. In the middle where it says FMS, it actually brings up your FMS as well as associated checklists that go along with the F-35. Each one of the smaller quadrants on this table serves a purpose. When you select each one of those, it brings up a smaller table which is displayed on your screen. The small table on the left of your screen controls the vector thrust of your aircraft. The one directly below that controls your speed. The table in the middle controls your heading and which map you wish to use. To the far right, the different views that you can take in the simulation, and directly above that controls some of your other controls like your weapon selection and your target selection. My recommendation would be to configure your joystick to handle as many of these options as possible. This keeps you from having to fumble around with your keyboard in the middle of trying to do some other things during your flight. The next quadrant that we're going to look at displays your navigation data. The data from your flight plan or manually entered waypoints are displayed here. If you wish to go to a previous or next waypoint, you can do that by selecting previous or next on your FMS. In the Autopilot quadrant, it displays the frequencies for your nav entered frequencies or for your communications frequencies. Directly to the right of that is where your Autopilot information can be dialed in manually, or it's going to be displayed from your flight plan. If you're doing an ILS approach, in order for it to respond correctly, AP, LOC, GS, and VNV all need to be selected. For further clarification on any of these quadrants, I highly recommend you refer to the manual. Now, this next quadrant is very important. It shows the status of the VTOL system. It can either be in manual or in automatic. it will visually show you in what position your engine is in reference to the vector thrust. Below that, it shows your gross weight of your aircraft. And remember, if you want to do a vertical takeoff, your weight has to be less than 38,000. Otherwise, you'll wind up crashing. You're just going to roll around the runway. It shows your thrust, your fuel temperature, the total fuel that you have, and will also display, and it's pretty close to being accurate, the range that you have based on the amount of fuel that you have left. One tip I can give you, if you're attempting to do a vertical landing, I highly recommend you have way more than 10% of fuel left. In the vertical landing mode and in the vertical takeoff mode, you burn a lot of fuel. So be conscious of that when you're loading your fuel at the beginning of your flight. Now, this next quadrant that we're going to take a look at displays your nav data, your map data, as well as target data. If you happen to look at the bottom of that quadrant, you'll see some orange colored diamonds. Those represent aircraft in your area. This map also shows waypoints as well as airports in your vicinity, and the airports are designated as the red colored ones. From this quadrant also, you can select the source that your navigational system will follow, whether it's VOR or the FMS. Now, this next quadrant, when selected, displays your camera, and also when deselected, it shows your AOA. In other words, it shows whether you're 10 degrees up or 10 degrees down, your heading, as well as your speed. This is the primary panel that you're going to come to actually start your startup procedure for the F-35. The very first thing you're going to do is set the battery switch to on, set the IPP to auto, and then to start. Set the avionics switch from off to on. Now at this point, I like to look back at the digital control screen and select FMS. Once you select FMS, it gives you the opportunity to bring up the actual checklist. Then you can follow the checklist for the remainder of the startup. Your very next step is to turn your generator from off to on, turn your nav lights from off to on, and turn your strobe lights from off to on. The next step is to slide your fuel switch to the on position and then depress the engine start button, and you will hear your engine begin to wind up. Once the engine speed has leveled out, from this point, I like to go ahead and turn my afterburner off. And then I also turn my landing taxi lights to the on position. At this point, I verify that my IFR probe switch is in the down position. This switch controls whether your fuel probe is either extended or stowed. I also move my canopy switch to the close position in order to close the canopy on the aircraft. Now, the very last step in the startup procedure is to turn your IFF to the on position or standby as directed by the tower. Also, using the plus and minus signs, dial in the squawk code that's been given to you. Now the only thing left is to taxi out to the runway and get airborne. Well, here we are in the cold and dark cockpit of the F-35. When you first enter the cockpit, that's all you see is the screen. It's totally dark. And let's go ahead and get into our startup procedures. I'm not going to go slow like I did in the initial part of the video. I'm just going to step through it. First thing we do is set the battery switch to on. Go from auto to start on the IPP. You'll start to hear it wind up. Once it reaches 95%, and you'll know when that is if you look at your checklist, item number 2 will be spooling up, and once it goes green or 95%, you can go ahead and turn your avionics on. You can turn your generator switch on, your nav light switch on, and then your strobe light switch on. Once all your switches have been placed in the position they're supposed to be in order of the checklist, you go ahead and take your fuel flow switch to the full on position and press your engine start button. If you look on your digital panel, you will start to see the thrust start to increase. From this point, I like to turn on my HMD, and usually I'll turn my camera on as well. The R2C, right now, because we're trying to go in accordance with the checklist, place in the sim position, you'll turn your landing light switch to on, and you'll verify that your afterburner switch is on. Myself, I prefer to have it off when I'm taking off. I'll only use the afterburner if I'm in the dogfighting mode per se, because it burns a lot of fuel. The next thing I'll do is key my FMS and bring up the flight plan that I've put together before starting this flight. And if you'll notice up in the second quadrant of the digital where it's blue, that's the flight plan that was actually loaded. Next, we go to our IFF and dial in the frequency as directed by the controller. Want to verify that our canopy is in the shut position and that our IFR probe is stowed. Take another look at our digital panel to make sure everything is as it was or as it should be, and bring up our additional toolbars. Go ahead and thumb through our digital checklist to make sure everything is where it should be. We've completed our digital checklist. Double check all of our toolbars and indications. The only thing left to do now is to release the parking brake, and we're ready to taxi out to the runway and take off. Well, we're on the runway. Everything's configured for a vertical takeoff. I'm going to go ahead and vector my engines down. Let me see. I think I'll do 40 degrees down. I'll place the system in automatic. That way, as I take off, it will automatically bring the vector angle up and assist me in increasing my forward momentum. Release my parking brake. Give myself about 95% thrust. And I am airborne. And you'll notice once my speed gets up to a little bit above 200, my flaps will stow themselves. The engine will begin to vector up automatically, and the landing gear will also come up. And I'm airborne. I'm going to go ahead and bank left and come back around and land back at the airport. And let's go ahead and take a look at the autopilot system. Under the AP heading, you'll see speed, and you can dial in your speed that you want to fly at. If you engage it in the on position, it's going to maintain that speed. If you put it in the auto position, it's going to fly the speed necessary to maintain what you have programmed in your GPS. Under LOC, that's your in essence like a localizer, but it will fly whatever VOR is programmed in there. It will fly to that. If you're in the GPS mode, it will follow the flight plan. If you press it again and it goes to heading, it will fly the heading that you set in. The GS next to that is for your glide slope, and it will intercept the glide slope and land the aircraft. In order to land ILS, not really land, but get you down in autopilot, auto, LOC, glide slope, and VNV needs to all be selected. Now for your altitude control, it can either be VS, which is your vertical speed, either plus or negative, whether you're climbing or descending. If you hit PH, that's your pitch hold, and so it will maintain whatever pitch that you have that aircraft at, or you can dial in your degree of pitch. We're going to check our map, and we notice that there are some aircraft approaching the mainland which have been unauthorized, and they're heading towards the carrier as well. So we've been directed to interrogate those aircraft and dispatch them if necessary. If you look on your tactical map, you will see some orange colored diamonds. Those orange diamonds on your tactical map will be indicative of the aircraft that's out there. Now, if you know the aircraft is out there and you're not seeing it, 9 times out of 10, the problem is that one of your plugins is interfering with that particular part of the aircraft systems. So I would recommend one at a time, go up to your plugin manager and deselecting plugins one at a time to see if you regain or can gain the indication of aircraft on your radar. Since this first contact is in such close proximity, I'm going to go ahead and I'll probably wind up taking it off autopilot so I can bring the aircraft around. Because remember, in autopilot, it's not going to make drastic heading changes. So if you want to make drastic heading changes like you're in a intercept situation, then you're going to have to take it off autopilot, put it on manual, and fly it in yourself.
Good afternoon, Costera 2709, bridge copy clearing with information Papa on gate Fox 14. Costera 2709.
You see the red diamond shape? That's when it's red, you can launch whatever missile or whatever you want to use to dispatch the aircraft. Once you get within a certain range, your missiles are no good and you're going to have to switch to guns. Since this aircraft is really close and it's a slow moving aircraft, I'm going to wind up going to guns. I'm going to bring the aircraft around and see if I can bring my guns to bear on the target. Another tip, if you're using the HMD, you definitely want to, or be careful to not have it in the 3D mode. You can have it in the 3D mode, but once you launch a missile or once you engage it with guns, if that target goes past you and if it's in the 3D mode, your camera is going to swing around and you're going to lose your situational awareness. And I fired my guns and that was a hit and the aircraft is going down. And there's another target around, so I'm going to bring my aircraft around to the right. I'm going to break a hard right and see if I can engage him. This one's a little bit further out, so I'll have the opportunity to utilize one of the missiles. And I currently have it in the 2D mode because I don't want the camera to swing around, and the lit diamond green color that's on the HMD is currently the actual target. If it was in 3D mode, then it would be red. And I have it in autopilot. I'm going to just try and ease it in. That's because I've got enough distance in where I can have it in autopilot. And missile away. And let's go ahead and switch to weapon view and watch the missile travel along its route. And it will make contact with the target unless they deploy some sort of anti-missile devices. But once it hits, as it just did, it'll switch back to your cockpit view. And you see the smoke plume where it's been hit and it's falling to the ground. Once again, if you were in 3D mode and you fly over that aircraft going to the ground, your view is automatically going to follow that target until it's totally destroyed when it hits the ground, and that can throw you off. So I'd recommend keeping it in 2D mode. We're going to do an air-to-ground engagement. I'm going to go over the Marine Corps base camp Pendleton, and so I'm just going to drop some of the ordnance in one of their drop areas here and then swing back around and try and regain our course. Another feature of this aircraft is the terrain following radar. What it's designed to do once selected is you dial in an actual numerical value, and it will maintain that altitude regardless of whether it's a hill or a road or whatever. You'll see the altitude of the aircraft go up and down because it's going to maintain that value. So in other words, if there's a mountain range that's at an altitude of 600, your actual altitude you're going to be flying is 1100 because you've dialed in 500. So the 600 plus 500, that'll give you 1100. So as you've noticed, I've selected TFR, and I've dialed in the value, and you notice that the aircraft will drastically or aggressively go to that altitude, and it's going to maintain it during that entire flight until you deselect it and go back to a normal altitude control mode. If you're going over a hill and you're going down to a valley, you'll notice that the aircraft is going to take a nosedive because it's going to try and maintain that value that you've set in. In this particular case, I really wanted to fly low because I enjoy the scenery in this area, and it was very well done. There are times when things may happen and you just lose total control of the aircraft. Well, in X-Plane, there's no worries about that. You'll notice on your HMD, I lost control of the aircraft and the arrow's pointing to where up should be. So you just scroll down, click on the auto recovery switch, and it will automatically right you to the position you need to be. At that point, you just regain manual control of the aircraft. We're going to go ahead and line up for a landing on the aircraft, but first we're going to fly by to make sure the deck is clear. And then I'm going to come back around and actually make a landing.
Cut.
Now, even though the air boss may be waving you off or telling you to cut power, this system is based on if you were a steady forward-moving aircraft, like if you were in an F-18, but not an F-35. And because I'm using a vertical assisted landing approach, it's going to be slightly skewed. When landing on a carrier, you want to aim for that number 2 wire, whether you have a hook deployed or whether you're doing a vertical landing. That's your landing area, and that's where you want to try and set your aircraft down.
Wave off. Wave off.
The best tip that I can give you in landing is to control your altitude
Wave off.
with your thrust.
Wave off.
And we're going to go ahead and taxi towards the catapult and set ourselves up for a cat launch. Once you move past the blast screen and you're on that catapult, it's a one-way ride. So if you want to do any final adjustments, do it before you get to the blast screen. Because once that your nose gear hits the catapult, you're gone. It's a one-way trip and you can't stop. I'm going to bring on a little fuel because I was a little low, and then we're going to take off and see what happens from there.
Sierra 2709, reback track, see ya. Bye-bye.
And I'm going to inch forward, and I'm airborne just that quick.
Clearance, good afternoon. Costera 2709, ready to copy clearance with information.
Well, right after takeoff, bad weather set in, and so we're heading for the catapult, or heading for the flight deck on the carrier, totally on instruments. I've selected CVN right under the camera, and what that does is it puts a circle on the HMD, which is exactly where the carrier should be. That 3-digit numerical value is the heading where the carrier is actually moving.
You're hot. You're hot.
Right now, I have no choice but to attempt a landing or either crash into the water because I'm only at about 9% of fuel, so there's no way I'd be able to fly around. So it's a one-way trip.
500.
You're hot.
I'm gonna try and concentrate because I can't miss this
Wave
one.
off.
Okay, I can barely see the flight deck now, so I should be in halfway decent shape. Dealing with a lot of wind and
Wave
the
off.
rain. A little bit difficult to try and control
Cut.
it.
Cut.
Afternoon, Costera 2709, bridge copy current with information Papa on gate Fox 14.
And I'm on the flight deck.
2709, good afternoon. Hood to the
Gate Fox 14.
And we'll look at that landing from the viewpoint of the crow's nest.
Airport via the Pound 2 RNAV departure. Deep transition. That's as filed. Squad 3326.
Costera 2709, we are clear via Pound 2 RNAV. Transition is P and then on file. Current with information Papa.
And we're going to taxi back up to the Catapult. And because of the bad weather that's in the area, we won't be landing at KNUC. We're going to, rather, we've been redirected back to KSAN. So we're going to launch and fly back to KSAN and do a landing, and maybe we'll do a vertical takeoff.
2709, we are clear via Pound 2 RNAV. Transition is P and then on file 4326.
Sierra 2709, reback track. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Clarence delivery, Delta 1353.
Calling clearance second.
Delta 1353. Clarence, good afternoon. It's American.
And I'm on final approach for San Diego International Airport, runway 09.
Where you parking? South Cargo ramp base 4.
I vectored my engines down to 100 to slow the aircraft down, as well as deployed my speed brakes. Flaps are deployed and my landing gear is down.
Day 45 to Ormond Beach, and then that's bound. Maintain 10,000 and squawk
500.
Maristar 9464, third south 1. Vectors to day 45, Ormond Beach, asphalt 10,000, 2072 on the squawk. Maristar 9464, readback correct. Stand by for a minute. Let me take a look at the flight plan. Maristar 9464, you all set. We'll talk to you later. Thanks, sir. Have a nice afternoon.
And I'm going to try and take it just a little bit past the numbers. I'm right on my glide slope, as indicated by the green ball right under the iCalls indicator. It's saying I'm a little slow and I need to speed up, but I'm going to try and maintain the speed.
Let me try to find it. Stand by. Southwest 1017, your clear cage in
30.
Single transition outside. Squawk is 2527.
Southwest 1017.
And my vertical speed was right at about minus 250, which is a good landing.
Southwest 1017, your back track. See ya.
And I'm going to go ahead and taxi just about to the end of the airport. I'm going to shut the aircraft down, do another startup, and then come back and do a vertical takeoff.
No, it's just you, but I have the clearance if you're ready to copy.
Delta 413 is ready to go.
I got a 413.
Transition is P and then on file 4326.
Sierra 2709, reback track. See ya.
Bye-bye.
And I'll go ahead and shut the aircraft down.
Clarence, good afternoon. Costera 2709, bridge copy current with information Papa.
Open my cockpit. Take my fuel selector switch to the off position to stop the fuel flow. Turn my landing lights off. Turn my afterburner off. And turn the avionics and the battery off. When you turn the battery off, all the other switches go to the off position.
Costera 2709, we are
And that's the
clear
shutdown
via
procedure for the F-35.
5326, turn bus. 5326, clear via the Halo 2 departure. Sarge transition. position as south, maintain 10,000. Expect flight level 22010 minutes after departure, squawk 7226.
Cleared via the Halo 2 departure, start transition, then is found. On maintain 10,000, expect flight level 220 and 10. Watch frequency, you will see the squawk 7226,
5326, be back is correct, and where are you parking at today?
We're ramp 4, D42, H6326.
Okay, 5326, thank you very much, have a good flight.
Thank you, good day.
Good afternoon, clearance Canada at 839 Yankee.
Alright, Cameron at 839. It'll be down to radar section going J43 is signal, and then it's down. Maintain 4,000. Section 10,000, 10 minutes after launch. Your frequency will be
110.8,
That's 839, correct?
Well, I hope you liked this video, so please hit the subscribe button and I'll try and post a whole lot more of them on YouTube. Be safe and I'll see you in the next video. Navy 9 signing off.